Alright, here's where it all began, on the Batman NES game from 1989. And there's really something to be said about the bold approach that Sunsoft took to this game. I don't think anyone would have anticipated a fuchsia and purple Batman as their avatar, and I certainly don't think anyone would have expected it to work nearly as well as it does. This is the absolute definition of turning lemons into lemonade here. Taking advantage of the limitations of the NES color display, Sunsoft decided to focus the backgrounds as their representation of the Tim Burton film. Dark, brooding, mysterious, and gothic. And therein lies the genius of the game. You didn't want Batman to blend into the background wearing a dark costume. So even though he was wearing an absolutely audacious color scheme, it worked. And somehow Sunsoft still managed to get a ton of detail onto his sprite. There's clear delineations on his cowl, boots, gloves, and trunks. There's folds in his cape, even an implied bat logo on his chest. It's remarkable how good this looks. Of the games to be based on Batman 1989, this is undeniably the Cadillac of those games visually. As close to a one-to-one representation of the 1989 Batsuit that Michael Keaton wore, the suit from the Genesis game features dark blacks and grays and strong lines that really flex the 16-bit muscles of the Sega console. It's also interestingly evocative of the Batman Year One costume from the 1987 comic, as well as what would eventually become the go-to costume in Batman the Animated Series. There are distinct lines to show Batman's boots and gloves, as well as a ton of detail in the cape to show the folds, as well as points at the base of its scalloped edges. I also really love the fact that we can tell he's wearing the signature bright yellow utility belt, as well as the yellow bat symbol on his chest. Briefly, I want to step outside of the States real quick, and this will be the only time I do this on this entire list, because this is just an absolutely magnificent oddity for the PC Engine out of Japan. One part Batman, one part Pac-Man. Batman for the PC Engine takes some visual cues from the '89 Tim Burton film. He's wearing a black costume with a gold belt and bat symbol, but also, interestingly, the game borrows heavily from comic book coloring techniques. Batman's using deep blues as a way to show detail on the cape. Now, this isn't obviously the best looking version of Batman that you're going to see today. It's probably the worst, but it's really interesting to see the type of game that was released in Japan based on the movie of the same name. Comparing it to the Genesis version and the NES version, there's three distinct visual styles at play here. It's really fascinating. Well, here we are on our second NES entry for Batman. This is Batman Return of the Joker from 1991. And in the first Sunsoft game, we got a purple and pink Batman, so why not a teal and blue one in the second game? For a game on an 8-bit console, this is honestly once again proof that Sunsoft was at their best when they were faced with technical limitations. The suit here looks incredible. There's a ton of detail to be seen from the distinct boots made for ass-kicking and gauntlets made for face-punching. Oddly, though, the gloves are teal rather than blue, saying that his gauntlets are separate parts of the costume. I thought that was kind of interesting. It's a very odd design choice. But there's also a lot of love given to the cape here. There's tons of points and edges, but my favorite detail is when Batman looks up. For the first time that I can recall, both ears are distinctly visible on the cowl. In 1991, we also got Batman Revenge of the Joker released on the Genesis. Now, this is essentially the same game as the NES one. It just looks significantly better. And this is also our first real comic book version of Batman to appear in a video game. This is a signature Neil Adams style here. There's shorter ears on the cowl than what Jim Aparo drew, and the bold blues on the cape, boots, and trunks are amazing, especially when paired with the bright yellows of the bat symbol and the utility belt. There's heavy scalloping at the bottom of the cape, a further nod to the comics, borrowing heavily from both Adams as well as Aparo. Honestly, the only thing that's really odd on this design is the weird wrist gauntlet that Batman wears, because that was the mechanic of the game. It was a shooter. It was a run-and-gun shooter, which is a weird decision when you stop and think of what the character is, but it works because the game's pretty fun. 1992 brought us not only Batman Returns the film, but also Batman Returns the video game for several systems. We're going to start off talking about the Genesis version because there's just so much detail in this game. First, let's give some major love right off the bat to, once again, the use of purples and pinks for Batman. It's not his main color this time, but they're lovingly added to the suit to grant depth and shading in a truly effective way. The costume looks amazing. There's tons of lines and detail markings added, making Batman look, honestly, for the first time, kind of imposing. There's a couple little details here that I think are just amazing and need to be recognized. Look at the detail on his cape, the boots, and his chest. This is on screen for like no time here, and the work put in here is so appreciated. And now, right here, okay, look at the cape as Batman does his sidekick. The folds, there's weight implied by it being laid on the ground. in a licensed movie game? Come on now. We really did not deserve Sega in the early 90s. Also in 1992, while things had started to turn the corner and less games were being made for the Master System and the Nintendo, Batman Returns actually released on the Master System. And I wish this game had bigger sprites in it because there is some serious legwork being done by the Sega team here. There's not a lot of detail to be made out based on how small Batman is on screen, but the detail they do bring out is honestly kind of incredible. There's sharp points on the ears, a bright circle on the chest, a scalloped cape, even lines on Batman's legs to show where the boots are. It's kind of a remarkable artistic feat what got pulled off here. And finally in 1992, we had a very different game than the other versions of Batman Returns we've experienced so far on the Super Nintendo. Bring on the beat-em-ups. Konami really took things to a ridiculous level on the SNES version of Batman Returns, giving Bruce a massive, and dare I say it, beefy character model. The look is signature Michael Keaton, complete with the carapace-like shells on the boots, the way the cape attaches to the bat symbol, and a heavily scalloped base of the cape, with boxy ab armor from the second film. I mean, look at the sprite compared to this picture of Michael Keaton in the actual costume from Batman Returns. It's a pretty darn good representation for what the limitations were of a 16-bit console at the time. In 1994, we stepped outside of the film universe of Batman and into the animated series, with the Adventures of Batman and Robin on both the Sega Genesis and the SNES. And when you have two different developers working on two games with the same name, but on two completely divergent pieces of hardware, you get some serious visual differences in your main character's appearance and animations. There's a major amount of detail here for the Batman model on the Genesis version, with Bruce having the distinct jaw of the Bruce Timm design, as well as the deep grays and blacks of his animated series costume, with a blue cape interior to give some delineation between what the inside of the cape was and the outside. He's also got a significant amount of detail on his cowl, with two eyes visible as he runs, and distinct ears to show the points on the top of the cowl. Where the game falls a bit behind its SNES counterpart, however, is that there just isn't as good an animation sequence at play here. The locomotion on the SNES cart just feels like an episode of Batman the Animated Series. This one just felt like another beat-em-up. Now, with the 1994 release of Adventures of Batman and Robin on the Super Nintendo, I gotta be honest, there's just something that I have eternally adored about this game. Whether it's the ridiculously fluid animation, solid gameplay, or nearly perfect representation of the Bruce Timm art style, I can't say. But what I can say is the developers behind this game took full advantage of the SNES to create something magical and something gorgeous. Batman is rendered nearly identically to his animated series counterpart, with amazing shading on the gray parts of his costume, as well as deep blue accent lines and blacks on the dark parts. There's also the signature yellow bat symbol on his chest, and not to be overlooked, the bright white eyes that stand out significantly against his dark mask. But my favorite part of this entire game is the overly exaggerated animations of Batman as he runs. This is a love letter to Bruce Timm. 1995 was an interesting year. That was the year that Batman Forever released in theaters, which was a mistake. But we also got the 1995 Batman Forever game on the Genesis. And kids, pull up a chair, because back in the 90s, we had digitized graphics. And what that means is game developers actually hired actors and put them in costume against blue screens. We couldn't afford the color green back then. And they performed their animations against no one, typically. And you had to hope that once they got in game, it looked good. And that didn't always happen. I'm primarily looking at you, Pit Fighter, but that's also on display here in this game. If you watch Batman punch here, he's just kind of flailing. And since there was no one actually up against him during this combat sequence, you just kind of hope for the best. Mercifully, though, what did happen with digitized graphics was that you got a perfect rendition of the on-screen costume you wanted. No sacrifices were made, no details lost, and no issues encountered. There might be more garish versions of the costume later in the game, but at the start, you were treated to a nearly perfect version of the costume Val Kilmer wore at the beginning of Batman Forever. Batman's first foray into the fighting game universe was not in Injustice. It was actually in the game Justice League Task Force, released in 1995. And believe it or not, the SNES version of this game was developed by Blizzard. The Batman and Justice League Task Force is nearly identical to the way Jim Aparo drew him in the 1970s on the Brave and the Bold comic. It's kind of the signature appearance of the character between what Aparo did and what Neil Adams did. He was heavily muscled, with drab grays and stark blue accents, a bright yellow belt, and a large bat symbol on his chest, that in the lore of the comics served as a target for people to fire at because it was armored behind there. And most importantly are the large ears, giving an even bigger nod to this being inspired by Apparo's rendition of the Dark Knight Detective. 1996 brought us Batman Forever, the arcade game on the PlayStation 1, and this game is absolutely ridiculous in honestly every possible way. If you ever needed to know what a distilled version of the video game industry was like for arcade machines in 1996, look no further than this absolute fever dream of a video game. There's some crazy detail in this game. The bat symbol on Batman's chest is absolutely massive. It takes up his entire upper body, and somehow Batman can call down lightning like he's Thor? That's weird, but when you do, you are treated to this absolutely incredible image of Batman, his cape splayed out behind him. Honestly, this is so stupid and it shouldn't work, but God almighty does it work so well. It's like a Kelly Jones Batman cover in full video game form. 1998 brought us the PS1 version of Batman and Robin, the game based on the movie from the previous year that killed off the Batman franchise. And this was our first 3D Batman, and it's also one of the absolute worst costumes ever for the character. There are weird sculpted muscles, a bizarre symbol that's inlaid on the chest in the same color as the rest of the suit, preventing it from being seen, and overall it's just a really weird aesthetic. In short, it's a perfect version of this suit from the film of the same name. Honestly, both the movie and the game are best forgotten. 2001 saw the return of the animated series Batman to video games with Batman Vengeance. This version here is on the Nintendo GameCube. Vengeance takes the Batman animated series style and does its level best to make things work in 3D. And honestly, what it does pretty well. There's interesting texture choices for Batman. There's a lot of sheen and glare on his cape, which isn't what I would have gone with. It makes it almost look satiny. But overall, it's a really good look. There's a lot of reverence paid to the source material. And I really like the touch of giving his eyes a glowing light source. So when you go into shadow, they're still illuminated and visible to the user. In 2003, we got Batman Dark Tomorrow. This version is for the GameCube. And if you were to ever ask someone to paint the most generic picture ever of Batman, it would result in the Batman from Dark Tomorrow. The best way to describe this one is that he is just kind of there. The costume is nondescript, the colors are muted, and the bat symbol and utility belt are even the wrong shade of gold. It's just a miss all across the board. The best thing I can say for this game is that the cowl looks pretty good, and he's got the creepy white animated series eyes. It's not really a great look for Batman overall, and I wish there were more details to point out here, but as you can see, he's just kinda there. Meanwhile, also in 2003, we got something that looks significantly better than Dark Tomorrow with Batman Rise of Sin Tzu. Rise of Sin Tzu looks amazing. Doesn't play great, but it looks amazing. This looks like the Hasbro action figures of Batman the Animated Series came to life. Bruce has the deep blacks and bright yellows on his costume, all framing his gray bodysuit. The trademark Bruce Timm style is here, with the sharp angles and contrast throughout. And in the game, the over-the-top animations and attacks are just fantastic. There's heavy kinetic moments and overly complex movements in order to deliver an attack. It feels like a page out of the Looney Tunes animator's playbook of how to animate a fistfight. 2005 brought us a revolution in Batman on film with Batman Begins from Christopher Nolan. We also got a game of the same name. This is the NGC version. And no doubt, it's definitely showing its age here, but I'm going to be honest with you, 15 years on, you're hard-pressed to find a better representation of the Christian Bale costume than right here. Every element is in play. The black armored costume, the cloth cape that was used more for stealth than for defense, the gold utility belt with a super subtle bat symbol on the buckle. It's nearly perfect, even down to the scalloping on the cape and the sharp 90-degree spikes on the gauntlets. It's a pretty fun game, too. 2006 got us kind of our first Batman ensemble game. I mean, yeah, he was in Justice League Task Force beforehand, but Justice League Heroes for the PS2 is the first game where he was teaming up with his fellow Justice League members. And this game is one of my favorite hidden gems on the PS2. It's kind of Warner Brothers and DC's answer to the X-Men Legends series. Visually here, Batman almost feels like a costume shop version of the character, unfortunately, because the costume just isn't anything remarkable, and it doesn't do anything to give it its own unique appearance. It's just a gray and black costume with a dude in it. I mean, the trademark iconography is there for sure, but it doesn't feel special. I will say though, I do dig when Batman double jumps in this game, because you get the full silhouette of the bat as his cape spreads out, allowing him to glide across the map. I wish you could see it more frequently in-game because I do like the utility belt, but you only ever really see it on the character upgrade screen in the pause menu. In 2005, we got our revolution for Batman on film, and then in 2009, we got our revolution for Batman in video games with the release of Arkham Asylum. Now, full disclosure, the videos you're going to see for Arkham Asylum and Arkham City are from the remastered version for the PS4. I always thought the Arkham costumes were really interesting. They felt really heavy and bulky, like almost Batman Dark Knight Returns-esque in their weight. Like there was a lot of power behind what Batman did, and the gloves and boots were just so thick and massive that it was a different take than what I was used to for what the character usually wore. And my favorite little detail about the Arkham games, and this can be seen in particular here, is that there's degradation to the costume the further into the game you go. As you can see, the bat symbol and chest piece are damaged with a slash, and it only gets worse from there. Dirt, grime, and filth are all over the place. It really feels like you're working in an unkempt, dangerous environment. But my favorite little details here are the knuckles on Batman's gloves. We've got reinforced metal bits sticking out of them, showing that while, yeah, Batman is just a dude, he thinks of everything. Having the equivalent of brass knuckles built into your gloves, that's not a bad thing at all when you're dealing with Batman's regular clientele. Alright, I'm going to call it right now. I don't think many of you have played 2010's Batman Brave and the Bold on the Wii. And I am also going to say that it is the best game on the Wii that you haven't played. WayForward took a vibrant and gorgeous animated series and turned it into something both incredibly fun to play and absolutely stunning to look at. The game is a perfect representation of the Brave and the Bold animated series, with distinct visuals for Batman and his compatriots. Batman is decked out head to toe in blue and gray, and is a neat cross between both the Batman the Animated Series character and Adam West's 1966 Batman. Bold colors and styles abound here, with a ton of detail to take in and enjoy. Just look at the costume, it's absolutely fantastic and signature Batman. Alright, things get really fun with 2011's Arkham City, and again, this is from the PlayStation 4 version. And they get really fun because we finally have a character model viewer. There are so many details discovered with this model viewer. There's Kevlar weave in Batman's cape when you zoom in. There's textured solidity to his helmet. His gloves, gauntlets, boots, and kick pads are heavily armored but segmented to provide full flexibility. It really adds to the realism of what we've come to know and love from the Arkham games. Hell, even his trunks aren't just cloth. They're leather and stitched together. And let's not overlook the excellence of the costume options for this game for Bruce. You got Batman the Animated Series, the 1970s Neil Adams suit, Year One, Earth One, Dark Knight Returns, Sinestro Corps, Batman Incorporated, all with their own unique details and textures. A lot of people don't care much for 2013's Arkham Origins, but I honestly find it to be a really fascinating and fun game. The suit in this game is an interesting take on what Batman would have worn in his early years. His cape sits a little bit lower on his shoulders and appears to be more fabric than Kevlar. His bulkier gloves and boots are present, which he continued to wear in the Arkham games until the final one. And the Batsuit just feels more utilitarian than anything. Like, it's definitely customized. You don't find Bat-themed body armor off the rack, obviously, but this feels like something Bruce lifted from R&D at Wayne Tech and then just altered a bit to make his own. It's almost like motorcycle armor, leathers, like what we see with the costuming from the Arrow and Flash television series. The game is a lot of fun, and I really like the look of Batman in this one, and you can actually see where the evolution to what he would wear in Arkham Asylum begins with this game. Also in 2013, we got Scribblenauts Unmasked. Now, full disclosure, this is from the Switch remaster, which released a couple of years ago. And if you've ever wondered what Batman would look like were he a paper doll, wonder no more, my friends. Featuring super deformed graphics with truly ambitious gameplay, Scribblenauts takes the base versions of literally every version of Batman ever and distills them down into cutesy versions of the Dark Knight Detective. The Switch game, like I mentioned, is a re-release, and we also got some additional skins added. As such, our quote-unquote regular version of Batman in this game is wearing the DC Rebirth suit from 2016. This puts a yellow outline around the bat symbol on his chest and gives a distinct yellow angled belt with gray accents on it around his waist. It's a remarkably accurate representation of a Greg Capullo costume, which I can't say I expected from Scribblenauts, but here it is. Now, there have been a lot of LEGO games
featuring Batman in one way, shape, or form, but this one is from 2014 and is LEGO Batman 3 Beyond Gotham. I'm going to be honest with you, truthfully, outside of the insane amount of costumes that can be unlocked for him, his core appearance remains pretty static throughout LEGO Batman 1, 2, 3, LEGO DC Supervillains, LEGO Dimensions, and the LEGO Movie video game. He's got a gray suit, a black cowl, and the classic utility belt and bat symbol on his chest. There's not a ton you can really do with a minifig representation. Easily the best detail, though, is that the cloth cape that Batman has is almost a one-to-one reproduction of the cloth capes used for LEGO figures at retail. The texture on it is nearly perfect. It looks incredible. In 2015, we saw the release of Arkham Knight, and this one feels like a happy blend between the Arkham games that came before it and strangely the suit from Injustice. There's a shift in the suit here, from the bulkiness of the first 3 games to one that's more sleek and shorn up in this game. But there's still a lot of armored segments and pieces, for lack of a better term. We now get to see segments and vents on Batman's cowl for the first time, with speakers next to his ears for communications. His gorget is now heavily armored, and his neck armor scallops over the back of his cowl for more protection. Straps hold the shoulder armor in place on the chest plate, and the utility belt in the Arkham series has now gone from the traditional series of pouches to a more futuristic one holding different shaped items, gadgets, and offensive support items. Kevlar weave is present in the body armor and on his cape, and it's a far more futuristic look than what we'd previously seen, and it all just works so well. And much like in Arkham City, we get a ton of new costume options. We have the New 52 skin, the 1989 Batman film costume, Flashpoint Batman, Batman Noel, 1970s Batman, Batman Incorporated, Arkham Origins, the classic gray and black, Earth 2 Dark Knight, First Appearance Batman, Batman vs. Superman, the Batfleck costume, Justice League 3000, 1996 Batman, the OG Arkham Asylum costume, Dark Knight Returns, kind of Batman Beyond, the Christian Bale Batman suit, Anime Batman, and finally the Batman of Zur-En-Arrh. In 2016, we had the release of the first Batman Telltale game, and one of my favorite parts of Batman Telltale is the ability to set your tech color. It's such a small thing, but it lets you customize the game just a little bit. Personally, I always go with the purple option because, in my mind, it's both a nod to the Sunsoft NES game with the purple and fuchsia there, as well as it being a subtle representation of the Golden Age Batman's first appearance in 1939 when he wore purple gloves. I know that isn't intentional, but that's my headcanon. Let me have it. The suit in this game is classic Batman. Stark grays and blacks with a large bat symbol that's close in appearance to the Year One or Batman vs. Superman suit. It's large and it draws the eyes to the chest. There's also a really neat version of this game where everything is in black and white, and it just looks gorgeous. This is a great game. If you're a fan of the Telltale games, this is one that you should pick up anyway, but it is a fantastic game to play and looks amazing. Finally, we have 2017's Injustice 2. This is the PC version of the game, and this is one of the more interesting suits for any of our games we've covered. Visually, Injustice is a very busy game. For lack of a better term, there's a lot of over-designing when it comes to the costumes for many of the characters, Batman included. The cape is where I want to start. The shoulder pleats are really odd. It seems really ridiculous and superfluous, as do the floating shoulder pauldrons. They look like they just get in the way for someone who's a fighting machine like Batman. And when we get into the game, you can see that there appears to be a border stitched around the edge of the cape. It reminds me of like the satin border you see on the outside edge of a nice blanket. Outside of that, it's a weird mix of heavy body armor and cloth. It almost feels like 2 costumes that were cobbled together and squished into one design. The utility belt is non-existent. It's just a yellow strap, and his cowl is overly sculpted with accent lines and a chin strap. I don't want it to sound like I don't like it, because in the world of Injustice, it works. But when I compare it to the other Batman costumes that we've looked at today, it's just a lot of outfit. Alright guys, so that's going to do it for our first installment of Pixel Evolution. I hope you enjoyed this one. Next month, we're going to be doing another one of these where we look at the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles history and their appearances and evolutions over the years. But now I want to hear from you. Let me know in the comments down below what characters or themes you would like to see covered in future editions of this segment. If you enjoyed today's video, please do consider giving it a thumbs up down below. Lets us know you're enjoying what we're doing. And if you're there and haven't done so yet, please do consider subscribing and ringing the notification bell so you can stay up to date with everything we've got going on. We're on our way to 500 subs, and I think that's awesome. You guys are the best. Until next time, guys, I'm Batman. I'm sorry. Until next time, guys, I have been Jay. I appreciate you being here. Be sure to play more games, stay square, take care, and happy holidays. We'll talk to you soon.